Welcome back to part 2 of our conversation with Claudine Jane from Warrior at Law. If you haven't already, please remember to like, subscribe, comment, and hit the little ring-a-ding bell for notifications. And then let's get into the episode.
We actually need to remember to get back to our conscious state.
And if you see that, you look at people who really push the boundaries of anything that they're doing or quote unquote succeed, one of the most common threads throughout all of these people is their search for discomfort, which means larger energy output, putting yourself in positions that you don't understand yet in order to thrive.
Absolutely. I think especially over the last 100 years, humans have been taught to always be comfortable because we've been taught that in comfortability we're safe.
Can I just pause you there real quick, because this is something that's been coming up for me a lot recently. I've been contemplating the idea, because when you say that, and when we're discussing our innate apathy, you know, it's got to come from somewhere. It's not fully, I think it's an aspect of us that has been taken advantage of. But I think the reason I interrupted is the thing I've noticed recently is that everything that we do, every last action is motivated by greater comfortability. Just the idea of shifting on a couch is to escape discomfort. Right? Sorry, I wanted to get that out. It just suddenly.
No, it's so important. No.
So it's an innate part of us
Yes.
that has been taken advantage of, has been inflated by an external source, and then been made to be the dominant awareness within society's awareness.
Well, they're profiting from it. So again, that brings us back to that whole concept of evil, good and evil. It's all about what can be profited from. That's really that hierarchy of the 13 puppeteers at the head of the food chain. It's all about dollars, profit, and you want to think, you know what, don't they have enough? You know, we've got trillionaires now. Don't you think they have enough? Some in the conspiracy theory space, you know, they might say, well, are they a different breed of humans altogether? They seem to have this real hierarchical greed. They don't seem to be able to, they have a thirst for power and dollars. It's a real narcissistic lineage. Now, who's to say when humans were evolved, we have evolved physically? But maybe there has been a line of the human race that did evolve with that narcissistic, power-hungry thirst as well. Who's to say that that hasn't happened?
I think there's a lot of people who have studied this particular aspect of history, and I think there would be there's a lot of theories around that.
Absolutely.
The potential truth behind that. Do you think that it matters who's at the top? Like, do we need to concern ourselves with the cause, or should we focus on the ensuing effects?
I always say we need to focus on what we can do, not what we can't. I always sit with something and I go, right, this is this quandary, this is this situation. I could get all bogged down into the hows and the whys and the difficulty of it. Or sometimes when you stare at something long enough, a bit like, you know, you can't find the tomato sauce in the pantry. If you stare at the pantry long enough, there it is on the left-hand side of the third shelf. I'm all about what can we do? I will sit with anything and I will go, right, let's look at this Tetris puzzle, and I'm going to focus on the ways that we can do something from this problem with ease, grace, and flow. What can be done in this situation instead of being worried about what can't be done. It's a bit like the land title situation in Australia, when in the 2000s legislation was changed that they were going to, they were no longer going to have paper titles in Australia when you bought property, or if you already had a paper title, they're going to phase them out and they would have digital titles. And again, a lot of Chinese whispers in that truth of freedom, sovereign movement, which I get, you work for 20 years and you have a property and all of a sudden legislation comes in to say that your paper land parchment title is null and void. Why are they doing this? Are they going to try and take our property off us? See, if you start thinking just about me, it comes from a place of fear, which I get. And so then it's like they were so focused on trying to lobby to get that legislation changed and overturned. They were so worried about getting the paper titles back. I need a tangible title, in my drawer or on a frame to say I own this. And I was like, the horse has already bolted. That legislation was passed while you were busy watching Love Island.
That's me. Sorry.
Anyway, so the thing is, legislation gets passed. Well, I didn't give my personal consent for that to happen. If you live in a country that has a democratic voting system, you actually did give them authority to do that. Now, thing is, we're not there at Parliament House every single day watching each bill that's going to go through Parliament sitting that day. Now, I know, does the ABC still televise Parliament sitting? I don't know. But when I was a kid, sometimes home from school, other people were probably watching Phil Donahue or, I don't know, Jerry Springer, but I was watching the politicians sitting in Parliament. I just found it interesting.
When you were how old?
Like, I don't know. When you have a day off school, you're 11, 12.
Nerd.
I know, I was such a nerd. Anyway, so the thing is, I think they still televise that. The thing is, to really be on the ball, we would have to be watching that every single day, and we'd even have to watch before that day to know what bills were, what date they were going to sit in Parliament and talk about passing whatever legislation through. We would have to be on the ball that much to know that. But this legislation passed through about the land title. So then people are panicking how, these companies that are now holding our digital titles, maybe they can go in and change the data. And I go, you know what? Stop right there. Let's focus on what we can do. If you're so worried, he who makes claim bears burden of proof.
Sure.
Right? So there are so many amazing, wonderful things that you can do yourself through the process of notices. Did you buy the property? So you've got the original sale contract. Did you actually initially have a mortgage with that? So then you've got your mortgage contract. Have you been paying council rates for many years? You've got evidence of the council rate invoices that have come to you. You've got other utility bills that have come in the name, whatever the name is on the land title. Right, so stop. Get all that evidence together. Then write an affidavit of truth stating just chronologically all those things. Use the system against the system. Get it notarized by a public notary. And then send that notice that has been notarized with all those addendums of evidence to the parties that you're so worried about. Send it to the land titles office. Send it to your local council. If you still have a mortgage, send it to the bank and send it to the digital company that now holds the digital title certificate.
Isn't this this approach seems like it's communally minded, right? Like from the perspective of you can create greater change by presenting this type of information or these types of forms to the relevant bodies.
Yes.
But would you say that there is merit in first recognizing that your innate fear when this legislation is passed is resting on a foundation of, I guess, deferring your power to another authority, for example? So you going, me being scared of somebody else taking my house means that I have put them in power in my mind to begin with.
It's the transference of power, whereas The power lies within us. It really does. And that's why by just doing that was just an example of focusing on what we can do. I've taken the power back by putting I'm all about the data, the meat and potatoes, what actually works in the real world, not something that's based on theory. So I put in place, I'm always saying, let's cover both arse cheeks, right? Let's cover our left butt cheek and our right butt cheek. So that's what I'm doing. I treat myself as my first risk management assessment plan. And so that was just an example to show, you know what, if that's your concern, and rightly so, you've worked really hard for 20 years to have that property, let's not live in a place of fear, because when we live in a place of fear, our brain, we have the best marketing program of our imagination. It will just go off onto so many different things, right? Instead, just go, right, I am just going to use data and do that process. Now I've covered my bases. I have been able to, if anyone nefarious in the future tries to take my land or change that digital certificate, I now have a chain of evidence to show that that's not the case. Now, that's me focusing on what I can do. I can't go back in time and change the legislation that's been passed, so I don't want to put my energy anymore into that. And there's been some amazing men and women who tried to lobby that over the last few years, and I watched them and they mean well and I send them love, but when they were doing it, I just wanted to grab them and go, you're putting your energy into something, the horse is already bolted.
Why is it that your chain of events that you put into an affidavit is superior to the legislation?
It's not superior to the legislation.
Why does it give you equitable rights or equitable...
So basically, again, that line, he who makes claim bears burden of proof.
Okay.
So I'm making a claim that I genuinely own that property, even if in a fictional, nefarious land, that digital title gets changed without my consent or notice. Now, I truly believe that is not going to happen, because we don't want to think things out into the universe. We don't want them to come true. I really believe that that's not going to happen. However, if you're worried about it, let's make sure we put things in place that if that ever eventuated, we can actually show the trail to show actually you may have edited this land title certificate that's now printed out, that's held on a server. However, I can actually show tangible evidence that I physically own this property. There was a sales contract, there was a mortgage contract. These are the rates that were paid in this name for the last 20 years. There's the evidence. I can't change the legislation, so it's not superior to the legislation. I'm actually using the legislation. In the affidavit, I think it would be a good idea to actually look at the legislation on how those digital server companies are holding those land title certificates and put it in the affidavit. So it's a bit like the digital, go back to the digital ID. There is legislation that has been passed that states that it is voluntary. Now, again, if you look at the education that we released over the last few months about this, a lot of the staff who have been trained who will say to you, oh no, this is the only way. For example, you lease a property. The RTA now, to be able to release your bond, is stating, well, we can't release that bond. You now need to go in here. You need to put your government ID in, then it's released to you. Legally, because it's been passed through legislation, they're not allowed to do that. They have to give you an alternative. So they're only offering you coffee, but they legally, at this point in time, I'm not saying that the goalposts won't be changed in the future, but right now, the biggest thing that we can do, instead of protesting on the street, is to have a group that comes together and watches what bills are about to be passed week after week after week. And that's where we put our energy and go, right, this legislation is going to be discussed in Parliament on the 13th of October. We need to make sure that's the bit where you can infiltrate and say, we're not happy about this. That's when, if you want to write letters to your MPs to say, that's where you want to put that energy. Instead of protesting on the street, use that energy to lobby at that juncture. That's where you have the people power right there. Instead of going, this is about to happen and getting your knickers in a knot. It's like, well, if you were paying attention 3 months ago or 3 years ago, why are you getting so upset now? Even on a council local level.
But wouldn't lobbying still be saying, listen, master, I don't like what you're doing. I want you to do something different. Why am I asking them to do anything at all? Why am I listening to that?
So I agree with you. I guess, again, I'm about what can I do instead of what I can't. And this is not coming from a giving up attitude. I would love to be able to get in a space shuttle and move to Privacy Planet. A couple of times when we were doing this workshop around the country, I would joke and say, Elon Musk, he just messaged me and he said there's no space shuttles going to Privacy Planet this week. Bummer. I would love that in an ideal world. However, the system isn't broken. The system has been this way. It is for centuries, right? Taxes, for example, have been in most civilizations. In the tax system that we're in now, the very first census that happened, the Doomsday Book. If you want to look up English history, look up the Doomsday Book. That's the first time that the king's soldiers came around and they knocked on your door and said, how many pigs do you have in the backyard? Now, I'm sure that the villagers of the time thought it was so the king could look after you. No, it's because then so the following year they went up and collated the numbers. Well, that farmer has 9 pigs, so we can tax him this amount every year, right? That's been happening century after century after century. Then more legislation and red tape has taken place to bind us further and further. That is just how the system is, and I cannot move to Privacy Planet. So let's just focus on what I can do.
Okay, can we not pay taxes and have it go unpunished?
Now, this is highlighted at the moment, and some may say tax is voluntary, some may say that the ATO is not a legitimate department. I'm very hesitant to say that because I am all about the data. Just because something hasn't been gazetted means it hasn't been publicly published, doesn't mean it doesn't exist. Now, yes, it's a legal entity. It's a department through legislation, through their system. If you choose to conduct activity under public obligation entities, then it isn't voluntary. You're choosing for that benefit and that service under that structure which they created. For example, a proprietary limited entity or a sole trader. So you do have to adhere to public obligations. Now, there are some mentors and educators that may disagree with me, and I am all for there's more than one way to skin a cat. One could choose to set up things based on purpose, mission, legacy, and being of service, not under that umbrella, and under an alternative jurisdiction umbrella, still not escaping Earth. There are still systems in place at an international level, the correct international covenants, laws and treaties, but not just any old international covenant laws and treaties. We can't just be throwing paint at a wall. It would have to be international covenants, laws and treaties that have been ratified, which means written into somewhere into legislation, using the system against the system in whatever land I'm mainly operating in.
So, but
over here, in a completely alternative jurisdiction. Now, that's not me saying that tax is voluntary. That's not me saying that one shouldn't pay tax. I've just decided to step to the side because this whole thing is bigger than Ben-Hur. So I've just decided, you know what? I'm not going to take on Ben-Hur. I only have one lifetime. I am just going to focus on moving over here instead of fighting this bit.
So did the corporate system, did that arise prior to this alternative jurisdiction that you speak of? And what's the name of this particular jurisdiction? And how many jurisdictions are there?
Okay, that's a really big question.
Yeah, no, sorry, there was 3 in 1.
That's all right. So I always say, I've got a tattoo that says less is more. Let's keep things simple. Let's just look at 2 jurisdictions. Like I said earlier, we've got that public GovCorp jurisdiction, and I call it the alternative jurisdiction because I like to stay away of saying the private jurisdiction. The only way a living man or woman could live in the private is if you had your own roads, school, currency, you get my drift. And also move to privacy planet. But we're on planet Earth with all these chains and boundaries in this GovCorp system that have been created for law and order, right? But it's also to keep everyone contained and controlled. So I'm going to, like I've said, I'm going to focus on what I can do. And there are structures that the system actually recognizes. And this is the thing. There are a lot of beautiful, loving men and women who set up societies or structures based around the word sovereign, right? And I won't go into that. On my YouTube channel, I do have an education about what the difference is between the words sovereign and sovereign and how we can look at that. Just go to that. So I don't believe in being sovereign, but I do believe in being self-responsible. And so I'm just going to use the knowledge of setting up alternative structures that the system actually recognizes. And that's the important thing. Whatever we decide to do in this alternative jurisdiction, if the system actually doesn't recognize it, they will just bulldoze over you. A lot of these processes and entities that are set up in this alternative jurisdiction by the Truth of Sovereign Freedom Private movement, they mean well, and symbolically they're beautiful. And from a place of values and virtues, they are amazing. But if the system internationally or federally does not recognize it at all, you will just be ignored and they will just steamroll right over you.
There's actually a great thing in a lot of ways too, because there is a great deal of, I think, mental pressure and turmoil when people first start to look at this particular space, because it is so in opposition to what we've been taught that there's naturally that type of mental friction.
There's resistance to it.
Massive amount of resistance to it. But the fact that what you're saying is, and correct me if I'm wrong, that there is a way to act, I guess, privately, for a lack of a better term, but also not get in trouble, which is what people are scared of to begin with in terms of putting these sorts of things into play. So like,
absolutely,
you know what I'm saying?
Who wants to put a big red flag on one's head?
Yes, that's right.
I don't. I literally want a life of ease, grace and flow, because if I'm energetically vibrating with ease, grace and flow, I'm a better resource for others. I'm a better resource to myself. And we can't eat the elephant all at once.
I could try.
You know, just take little bite-sized chunks of the elephant. And that's why I get a lot of emails on a weekly basis just going, I don't even know where to start.
Yeah.
I actually say, right, before you're thinking about creating all these processes, entities, structures, start here. Start with really being able to, instead of labeling yourself with what's out here, start looking at natural law. Start looking at, you know what, just in my everyday actions, I'm going to look at the law of equity. My intention. What is my intention? My intention is to come into everything with clean hands. I'm going to lead myself just in small ways. Come and go into everything with clean hands. So then every decision you're about to make, do no harm, cause no loss. It's pretty simple.
So there's but around this space, there are a few, I guess, buzzwords that people learn that get the selfishness, I think, really pumping. And one of them is discharge. There is a theory that I think in the States it seems to be easier, that if you get a car loan, for example, through, what do they call them? Like, the finance department of a car company, that you are you're writing your signature on the contract. That
Yes.
contract is taken to the RBA. Credit is withdrawn. They give you the car. They take the credit, and then they also essentially are asking you to pay again. Right? They've already received their value through the credit from the RBA, but the scam is that they are asking you to pay again. And because it is unlawful, or that it is inequitable, there is not an equity of exchange, that you can, as the consumer, discharge, meaning wipe your debt away. Is that something that is possible in Australia? And what are your feelings and thoughts around that mode of operation in general?
Now, this is not my area whatsoever. On my own values, I'm in a quandary about this, because I believe everything needs to be a fair energy exchange. Now, I agree with everything that you just said there. They're already getting something, but then they're asking you to get it. They're just making profit by asking you for the money, right? However, what gives me the right to get something for free? Now, that has nothing to do with that scammed banking system, right? The whole topic of mortgage or debt, it's basically the debt agreement. I don't agree with that. And I think it's fraudulent from a commerce level. It's absolutely fraudulent. That is not my area of genius. There are amazing mentors that it is. I do know in the US, the US and Australia are so different because how they work legally. And so it's very difficult. It's like comparing, apples and oranges. And I do think in Australia, from what I've seen of others, it has been more difficult in Australia to do than in the US. So away from that whole commerce and the scam and the fraud of all of that, energetically, something that's just been sitting uneasy with me and I don't have an answer yet is, if I go get a loan for a car, I haven't been able to save up enough of my own sweat equity to get the car. So then I go to a car company and I get finance for $50,000 and I get the Land Rover, right? It's sitting in my driveway now. What's given me the right, this has got nothing to do with the car company, this is universal energy, to not have to work for that vehicle and get it discharged? I'm just sitting with that. This is an unanswered question. I'd love to hear what others feel about this. It's a bit like I say to you, I want you to do all my gardening. Do all that gardening. I'm not going to pay you anything for it. So then I've just got free labor from you. What gives me the right to do that? Or I always say a fair energy exchange. When you hear people say, I charge $50 to give a massage. And I say, is that really valuing yourself? That's not greedy. That's from a place of value. Do you think that's a fair energy exchange? You've spent 10 years training yourself to do that. You're the best shiatsu massager in the region, but you're only charging $50 and you're going to massage me for 2 hours. Is that a fair energy exchange? So with this discharge piece, if you're and I just want to say, you spoke really well about the fine, the infringement that you were able to work yourself around. And I've said that when we use language of getting out of something, I want to get out of it, right? Or I want to discharge it. I'm worried about that language, about getting out of something. Well, you obviously were in something, weren't you? If you want to get out of it. So I believe that it is fraud. The commerce system is fraud, but I also think on an energetic level, going in and out of something with clean hands and what's right and wrong here for me is I worry about this whole movement that wants to discharge things. And for example, I've watched it. I've seen people who rack up a huge credit in America, especially they rack up a big credit card debt and then they try and get it discharged. From a place of virtues and values, where is that coming from?
I agree with you on that, because this is the reason why I'm asking this question, because it did, when I was first learning about it, I could feel the little green goblin growing inside me around, what could I get? What could I do? It's kind of, there's an excitement attached to it because it's a brand new thing. And I think this is where people shoot down certain rabbit holes and start coming up with their own theories around things, right? However, at the same time, if we're talking about energy exchange and the find that you were talking about, where we were in something to begin with, well, I was placed into that due to a system that was imposed upon me. As far as finance is concerned, if I want to play in that realm, I have this system that has been imposed upon me. Yeah, I'm choosing to go in, but let's use your gardening analogy. If you're asking me to do the gardening for free, right? You're not paying me anything. That's inequitable. However, if I'm getting money as a subsidy somewhere else, is it still inequitable, or is the exchange happening on from a perspective?
It might not be this way. The flow might be coming from a different angle. Absolutely.
That's right. However, I also think, and this kind of moves into karma territory as well, where, my teacher said to me once that if you recognize the ill that you've caused, for example, then you will be karmically burdened by it in this particular lifetime. However, if you're a sociopath and you don't view it as such, you may not be affected, because the effect comes as a result of you holding a particular energy belief or whatever it may be. There are things that come in sideways that directly correspond to what you believe about the situation. Drawing back to the, how was I going to draw that back into the finance perspective? If you don't recognize that there is an exchange, that you are in some way, shape or form in that exchange giving something, and you're holding on to this, I just got that for free, then maybe that is the issue. Maybe there is an issue in that needs to be rectified within ourselves. And this is not my hard and fast answer, but I've been questioning that as well. I think the thing that I don't necessarily enjoy about that remedy is the type of energy that it produces within me when I know that it's an option. If I haven't crossed my T's and dotted my I's internally, then I can see how you end up going down this road of ever greater selfishness.
And I think also, I believe the system always wants us to be the debtor. And I choose to be the creditor. So there's less instant gratification in choosing to be the creditor. I can't just get a line of a loan and get that instant gratification. So for example, I might run a wellness retreat. I would like to buy a block of land on the Sunshine Coast to continue the projects that I run. Now, instant gratification would mean I go to the bank, I get a loan or a mortgage to do that. I get to do it next week. However, by doing that, I then partake in that debtor fraud system. I also have to show all my notice of assessments. I have to share all of that private knowledge that they're making profit off my sweat equity. Those taxes go there. I'm not comfortable with that either. So instead, I'm going to choose to set up structures not under that umbrella, over here lawfully. And then I might not have instant gratification, but I'm going to do the maths and I'm going to go, right, if I was still part of that obligatory system over here under those public obligations, how much would I have to put aside to show that I can service that loan. Instead of doing that, I'm not going to piss the money up a wall. I'm going to put that surplus of how much I would have been having to put aside to service that loan over here in a surplus pot of gold or a bank account or wherever you choose to put it. And I might not be able to buy that block of land next week, but in 3 years' time, I will have the full amount. I will be the creditor. I will not have to go down and get a mortgage, right? Or go into a death agreement. I can buy it in full. And on top of that, I'm also going to choose what type of structure am I going to do that? How do I create a 6 degrees of separation between GovCorp and the system and the powers that they seem to have over me and take power back? I always talk about looking after the left butt cheek and the right butt cheek. I'm also going to look after my back. I'm also going to make sure that a nefarious party can't stab me in the back. So then I'm going to make another decision at that fork in the road and go, am I going to put that, I've worked for 2 years to get this dream of what I wanted to get. Am I going to put that in my first and last name, that same name that's on that contract that have bound me in over here? Or am I going to choose to put that in trust? To trust within myself and also a physical trust. Now I've made, I think, decisions more based on self-responsibility and self-determination, but also protection from any nefarious parties, whether it's GovCorp, whether it's a private party, whether it's a third party who wants to come at me for something. I've made those decisions, and yes, it's taken me a little bit longer to get there. It's taken me 2 to 3 years instead of 1 week, but I feel really good about that. And that's where I think we need to remember that if we do everything from the place of do no harm, cause no loss, being of service, and this is not a righteous thing. This is genuinely when we come from a place of love. And I'm not talking about romantic love. I'm talking about a place of genuine love in here. What do you think has made humanity be here till now? It's been love. It's been from a little village and tribe looking after each other. Where there is love, I really mean this, nothing is actually too much trouble, and there is actually always time. I actually say that to myself probably multiple times a day, and I've done that for 20 years. Where there is love, nothing is too much trouble, and there is always time. And I find when I'm in places of anxiety or stress or worry, or I'm tempted to make a knee-jerk decision, I pause and I remind myself of that exact statement. It straight away calms me. I realize, one, I don't need to, because I think succumbing to their powers that be is being reactive. When we learn to slow things down for ourselves, the abundance channels will open far wider, because it's not about me anymore, it's about we. And I think at the end of the day, if you're worried about where to start from here, it's all drops in the ocean. Just start with one small thing every day to take some of that power back. Be self-determined. And the biggest thing that we can do is education. We talk about the word outsourcing. The wisdom is in us all along, but we only know what we know till we know something more, better, true. So there's nothing wrong with getting education and mentorship and learning outside ourselves. Of course, we take all those pieces. And then we need to remember one thing before we finish our conversation today. Something else we need to remember is our intuition. I think our intuition has led us to where we are today. Our intuition allowed us to move out of the way of dinosaurs.
How do you consolidate in yourself, because you are very data oriented? How do you consolidate that inner knowing that you want to follow this thing that doesn't require data? Is there ever a conflict within yourself surrounding these two disciplines or observations?
No, because I can still follow the data, and I call it the meat and potatoes. I really need to see how that works. I'm not a theory based. I'm about tangible. I want to see it really work. The thing is though, the data also sits with my intuition. I go back to that word duality. They can work at the same time, because I believe when I have the data and then I have my intuition, and we've also been programmed and taught not to trust that intuition and to outsource those decisions.
Yes.
So when they meet in the middle, that's where I feel most at balance.
Harmony.
Actually.
Yeah, that's nice. Now, I just want to circle back to the digital ID just to bookend it. For people who don't want to get the digital ID, they have an aversion to doing so, even if they don't quite understand why they have an aversion to it. How do you think that they should operate? How can they operate within the public system that, I'd say, without seeing the data, in reality has this support of the majority of society, not just conscious support, but the assent in their actions, in them the compliance, because we're such herd pack type creatures, where we look to our neighbor to see what it is we can and cannot do, right? If we're as an individual who doesn't want to get it, moving into society, so let's say we can't go into a supermarket because we don't have digital ID. How do you suggest that these people navigate a world in which they are not allowed to operate?
So like I said before, as of today, this very minute, the legislation does state that it's voluntary. Now, there are some exceptions to that as well. So I think the first step we can do is educate ourselves. So in that digital ID education, which we've released, we cite the exact legislation and even how to find it. Because to be honest, before I entered this space, I wouldn't have even known where to find legislation to look it up, to read it. Or I've been like, well, I'm not legal, I'm not lawful. Anyone can read a paragraph in some legislation. The thing is, it's all about, you need to, before you look at the digital ID, you need to come back to remembering who you are, because that gives you confidence to then be able to say that I'm at a supermarket, they're not letting me in, I can't scan their little app because I haven't done the digital ID. I can confidently now state, this is the just very calmly. We never have a belligerent attitude. Calmly just state, this is actually the legislation in this country. It states that you do need to give me another option for me to be able to enter these gates. These are the other options. It's in the legislation. Calmly state that. They are the facts. Now, the thing is, it happened during COVID at pubs, hotels. We had to do the check-in. They were just mandates, but we didn't know they were mandates. I think, though, I'd like to think that even the mainstream herd have learnt a little bit.
Yeah, me too.
And I've watched them. And there are a lot of people that even got the jabs who aren't keen on the digital ID. I think they've seen that rodeo, and guess what? Something in our favour. This isn't our first rodeo.
Yeah, agreed. Claudine Jane, can you please tell everybody where they can find you? YouTube, Warrior at Law, website,
Sure.
any relevant
Absolutely.
handles?
So, YouTube, it's Claudine Jane 13, Claudine Jane 13. There is a plethora of free resources on there, whether it's about smart meters, whether it's about educating our children when they go visit a doctor, digital ID, alternative structures and pathways under international law. warrioratlaw.org. warrioratlaw.org is an amazing project of a non-profit, non-government, unincorporated association under international covenants, laws and treaties that provides, again, amazing wealth of resources and education. Most of it is completely free. to be of service to our members in the wider community. I recommend those two places. I would also like to recommend, if we want to start with ourselves, a beautiful guest you've had on previously, The Humble Kingdom. The Humble Kingdom, if you look that up, Tom Barnett, that website is an amazing resource about natural law, do no harm, cause no loss, to really comprehend that everything is an offer coming to us and we have choices. That's a beautiful start if you want to start with yourself.
I think he's a great source to learn how to find who we are.
Absolutely. And then the next step above that is to really work out what's legal and what's lawful. Also comprehend the different levels of law, and then comprehend that there's more than tea and coffee that's out there. And that's where Warrior at Law comes in. But also, I always talk about, let's look at remedy with realism of what actually works on planet Earth, not some privacy fictional planet that we can't actually fly to at the moment.
Yeah.
So yes.
Beautiful. Thank you, CJ. Appreciate
Thank you.
you. Thanks for coming. Thanks for making time for me. We slotted it in within a few days.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
It's been valuable. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much to everybody who's tuned into this episode. This concludes part 2 of my conversation with Claudine Jane from Warrior at Law. If you've liked this episode, if you like this content, and I really hope you do because I love making it, please remember to like, subscribe, comment, and hit the little bell icon for notifications. I think. I've heard a whole bunch of other people say that. I haven't actually explored that myself, but I'm pretty sure that's what it is. Anywho, we'll see you next week.